All right, this is my presentation for student motivation for Module 3. Um, the first little piece, I want to talk about kind of like some of the main ideas that stuck out to me from the TED Talk by Daniel Pink called The Puzzle of Motivation. Um, I thought it was really interesting to hear about all of the examples of rewards and incentives dulling thinking and blocking creativity. Um, I see this in my classroom when for the sake of time or for the sake of some other motivation or trying to get through content, I might try to hurry students along and say, oh, well, if you do this, you can get this. If you do this, then you can get this. And um, it really does dull their ability to think creatively or dull their ability to even have the time to think deeply about the concepts that we're talking about. I think it's fascinating that we ignore the social science backing all of this data that he was talking about, and I wonder like what our assumptions about learning say, like as a society, like tell us as a society about the types of educational systems that we've set up. I think the assumption is that the product is the most important thing in the classroom, when in reality, teachers and the educational world, at least a lot of people, totally understand, at least should conceptually know, that the process is probably the most valuable piece. Because if the process goes wrong, then the outcome isn't necessarily great. I think it's really important to talk about how all tasks are not outcome driven and prescriptive. So in my classroom, the essay isn't the most important piece. It's the revision process. It's the small assignments that I give out that accumulate into an essay that are perhaps the most formative piece of the entire assignment or unit. Um, this is challenging though, because English classrooms do not have concrete solutions or patterns, and so students who have kind of existed in this educational space for a really long time, who are used to a checklist, who are used to very prescriptive tasks and are incredibly outcome driven. If I do this, this, and this, then I'll get an A or get a B. It's hard to explain to them the idea of just sitting and talking about a piece of literature or how open-ended discussion is. There's no really like strong pattern for what makes a discussion strong or what makes a paper strong. It's just learning how to articulate yourself well in a way that serves the conversation that you're in at the time. And I think that some of these quotes, especially this quote, the rules are mystifying, the solution, if it exists at all, is surprising and non-obvious. If then rewards will not work. So if you do this, then you will do this. That's not going to work well in the English classroom at all. Mostly because we're not really operating with equations. Um, and then on a greater level, besides subject matter, behaviorally, if then rewards and solutions just they don't tend to fix the core problems that arise in a classroom. Tasks that called for even rudimentary cognitive skills led to poor performances. So it's just talking about the deficit of creative thinking that is occurring. I thought it was important, the big overarching idea of encouraging learning for the sake of learning. And I liked these three concepts that were broken down: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think I would add to that there's a fourth factor that needs to be included in order to promote learning for the sake of learning, which is compassion. So being compassionately beside a student as they try to master this new way of learning. The TED Talk, Cultivating Intrinsic Motivation and Creativity in the Classroom, was really inspiring to me. Beth Hennessy talked about intrinsic motivation, saying we need to approach a thorny problem for the sheer pleasure, enjoyment, satisfaction, and challenge of that task itself, rather than for some extrinsic goal. I had some of my advanced students recently read Grapes of Wrath for an extra credit assignment, and they were really perplexed by that book and its plot. And I realized that a lot of students have been approaching literature in my class for the sake of the plot. I mean, that makes sense. They've all been taught to kind of pick apart where the theme is, where the climax is, the plot structure, look to all of that stuff. And I really had to make sure I was slowing down and explaining that a lot of times in the English classroom, we don't read for plot anymore, especially as you get older and go into more advanced literature classes. We are more looking at the complex, thorny problem of the novel and the challenge of understanding what the author was trying to tell us or what kind of character development was going on. And it's going to be messy, but I love it. And so I think I really latched onto this quote because it's easily, in my mind, related to some of the deep, hard work that I've done with literature in my life. Witnessing this in the classroom, so all of these things are constantly present in my classroom, and I feel like I've kind of sprinkled examples in throughout the presentation, but the ERG theory was fascinating. I'd never seen it presented like that before, so existence, relatedness, and growth are like the three basic needs, and it's the same thing for students. So if you're presenting a new concept, talking about its existence, how it relates to what you're talking about, and how you can grow with that, but also with a student needs food, water, shelter, good health, and feeling safe. Relatedness, the student needs to relate to other people. And growth, a student needs to be creative and perform meaningful work. I feel like a lot of my students, especially in some of my lower level classes, are pretty stuck on this existence piece. A lot of them, especially right now with the weather getting colder, they don't have good health. They don't have reliable warm shelter, and a lot of them do not feel safe in their home, and some don't even feel safe in the classroom. I think a lot of students, because of current events and stuff, have this underlying fear in a classroom, which is really unfortunate. So trying to find ways to mitigate and that feeling and also like provide those needs is imperative if there's going to be any growth. Frustration regression principle means was interesting to talk about too. It's when you travel backwards through these needs when met with challenges or frustrations. So it's when you go back through these needs when a fight or flight response is triggered. So if there's something that I say or someone in the classroom says or something that we read or something that we're exposed to that triggers a response, they would go back to needing to be grounded in relatedness or assured of their safety or any of those things. So it's important in the classroom to like pay attention to how the environment is set up for students to be able to grow and be able to have any kind of these motivational experiences. All right, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.